A German shepherd chained to a tree for over a year, exposed to the elements day and night. A woman who refuses to look away despite being told, "It's none of your business." What happens when determination meets desperation? When this woman finally manages to free the neglected dog, something happens that stuns everyone involved. This incredible story of rescue and revelation will leave you speechless as it unfolds into one of the most unexpected twists you'll ever witness. Get ready for a journey that will change how you see courage, perseverance, and the mysterious bonds that connect us all. Sarah Morgan drove the same route to work every day for 3 years. The small blue house on Maple Street was part of her daily landscape, unremarkable except for one heartbreaking detail in the backyard. Visible from the road, a German shepherd lived chained to an oak tree. The dog had been there through scorching summers and freezing winters. A rickety wooden dog house provided minimal shelter. The chain was short, limiting movement to a small circle around the tree. Sarah had never seen anyone interact with the dog beyond occasional food and water refills. Today, Sarah pulled over. Something had changed in her, a quiet resolve replacing the helpless anger she'd felt driving past each day. The dog was thin, its once rich coat now dull and patchy. As she approached the fence, the shepherd rose slowly, ears alert but body language cautious. "Hey there," Sarah called softly. The dog watched her with amber eyes that seemed too wise, too knowing. No barking, no wagging, just silent observation. Sarah took photos, documenting the dog's condition, the short chain, the inadequate shelter. When she knocked on the front door, a middle-aged man answered, annoyance visible on his weathered face. "What?" he demanded. "I'm concerned about your dog," Sarah said, surprised by her steady voice. "Mind your own business," he snapped. "The dog's fine, got food, got water, but he's chained out there all the time in all weather. That's not, he's a guard dog doing his job. Now get off my property before I call the cops." The door slammed, but Sarah stood firm, looking back at the German shepherd. She made a silent promise, "I'll be back, I won't leave you there." As she walked to her car, the dog watched her intently. For the first time, its tail moved slightly, not quite a wag, but something like recognition. That night, Sarah contacted every animal welfare organization in the county. Most expressed sympathy but cited limited resources and jurisdictional issues. If the dog has shelter, food, and water, they explained, it's hard to prove neglect under current laws. Frustrated but undeterred, Sarah started documenting everything: daily photos, weather conditions, how long the dog remained without human contact. She learned the owner's name, Frank Miller, a long-haul trucker, often away for weeks. 2 weeks into her documentation, Sarah noticed something. Despite its harsh conditions, the German shepherd maintained a dignified bearing, and something about its eyes, the way it tracked her movements, how it seemed to understand her words, struck her as extraordinary. "I swear you understand every word I'm saying," she told the dog through the fence one evening. As if in response, the shepherd tilted its head, eyes never leaving hers. Sarah had no way of knowing that this observation would be the first clue to the shocking truth that would eventually come to light. After a month of daily visits, Sarah had established a routine. She'd stopped by the fence each morning and evening, talking softly to the German shepherd. The dog now recognized her car sound, standing at attention when she arrived, the chain pulling taut as it tried to move closer to the fence. Sarah had named him Atlas, a being forced to bear a heavy burden. She'd begun tossing treats over the fence, high-quality food that Atlas caught with surprising dexterity. Despite his limited movement today, she came with a plan. Frank Miller was away again, his Truck absent from the driveway for 3 days now. Sarah had consulted with a lawyer friend who specialized in animal rights. Document everything Jennifer had advised. If the animal control officers can see a pattern of neglect, they might act. But Sarah, she'd added cautiously, be prepared for this to take time. The system moved slowly. Time was something Sarah worried. Atlas didn't have the summer heat, was intensifying, and the tree provided minimal shade during peak hours. As Sarah approached the fence, she noticed something different. Atlas was lying down. His breathing labored in the heat. He struggled to stand when he saw her, but couldn't seem to find the strength. Without hesitation, Sarah climbed the fence. Trespassing be damned. Atlas watched her approach, no aggression in his posture, despite her being a stranger entering his territory. When she knelt beside him, offering water from a bottle, he drank gratefully. Up close, his condition was worse than she had thought. Ribs visible beneath his dulled coat, sores where the collar had rubbed his neck, raw areas of fur missing entirely. I can't leave you here, Sarah whispered. Her mind raced through options, none of them legal. Taking someone's dog was theft, regardless of how they treated the animal. That's when she noticed Atlas's tags. The collar was so embedded in filth and matted fur that she hadn't seen them before. Gently she cleaned away enough to read the information. Her heart stopped. The name on the tag wasn't Atlas, or any name Frank Miller might have given him. It read Commander, with a phone number and address in a city 200 miles away. Sarah took photos of the tags, then called the number with shaking hands. Hello, answered an elderly woman's voice. This might sound strange, Sarah began, but I'm sitting next to a German shepherd named Commander. Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. That's impossible, the woman said. Commander disappeared with my son David over a year ago. Their car was found empty. They were never located. Sarah looked at the dog, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes. Ma'am, I think you need to come here immediately. What Sarah didn't say, couldn't articulate even to herself, was how those eyes seemed to be pleading with her, not just for rescue, but as if the dog was desperate to communicate something more important than its own suffering. Eleanor Williams arrived the next morning, driven by her daughter Susan at 72. Eleanor moved slowly with a cane, but her eyes were sharp and determined. When Sarah met them at the local diner, Eleanor clutched a photo album and a folder of documents. Before we go there, Eleanor said, hands trembling slightly, I need to explain. My son David was a military dog handler. Commander was his partner through 2 tours in Afghanistan. When David left the service, he couldn't bear to be separated from Commander. He petitioned to adopt him. Susan continued, they were inseparable. Last February, David was driving to visit us when they both disappeared. The car was found on a back road, doors open, no signs of struggle. Search teams found nothing. After 6 months, the case went cold. The police theory was that David might have Eleanor's voice broke, taken his own life in a remote location. He'd struggled with PTSD, but we never believed it. David was getting better, had started a new job training service dogs. He was moving forward. Sarah showed them the photos she had taken of the chained German shepherd. Eleanor gasped, tears flowing freely. That's him, that's Commander, but how did he end up here? Where's David? The drive to Frank Miller's house was tense. They parked across the street. Observing from a distance, Commander was in his usual spot, but seemed more alert today, as if sensing something important was happening. We need to call the police, Susan insisted. This is evidence in a missing person case. Miller claims he bought the dog from a stranger at a truck stop. Sarah explained, we need to be careful. about accusations. As they formulated a plan, a squad car pulled into Miller's driveway. Someone had beaten them to it. From their vantage point, they watched an officer approached the backyard while another knocked on the front door. Sarah recognized the animal control vehicle that arrived minutes later. "What's happening?" Ella Lehner asked. "I might have sent my documentation to law enforcement yesterday," Sarah admitted, "but I didn't expect such a quick response." They watched as Frank Miller emerged, gesticulating angrily at the officers. The confrontation grew heated until one officer pointed to their patrol car, where a laptop sat open. "They're showing him something," Susan murmured. Miller's demeanor changed suddenly from defiance to something resembling fear. He began talking rapidly, pointing away from the property as if explaining something. The animal control officer approached Commander, who allowed himself to be unchained without resistance. Instead of loading him into their vehicle, the officers led Commander toward Ella Lehner's location. Sarah helped Ella Lehner from the car just as an officer approached with Commander on a new leash. The moment Commander saw Ella Lehner, he froze. Then, with a low whine that built into a joyful cry, he pulled forward, nearly dragging the officer in his desperation to reach her. "Commander," Eleanor whispered, dropping to her knees. Despite her age, the German shepherd pressed against her, trembling with emotion, licking her face as she sobbed into his fur. The reunion was undeniable. This was no case of mistaken identity, but, as the officer explained what they had learned from Frank Miller, a chill ran through Sarah. Commander wasn't just evidence in a missing person case. He was the only witness to whatever had happened to David Williams. The police station conference room was quiet, except for the soft whine Commander made whenever Eleanor stopped stroking his head. The German shepherd hadn't left her side since their reunion, pressing against her legs as if afraid she might disappear. Detective Wilson spread photos across the table. Frank Miller admits he bought Commander from a man at a truck stop in Oakage last February. Claims he didn't know the dog was stolen. Miller described the seller as mid-30s, dark hair, scar across his right cheek. Continued. Larson said the man seemed desperate for cash, sold the dog for $300. No papers. Sarah noticed how Commander's ears perked up during this description, his body tensing. "We're reopening David's case," Wilson explained. Miller's description matches a person of interest in another investigation. Lucas Reed, a mechanic with prior for armed robbery. His shop was near where David's car was found. As the detective laid out next steps, Sarah watched Commander. The dog's focus was intense, following the conversation as if understanding every word. When Reed's name was mentioned again, Commander made a low growling sound. "He remembers something," Sarah said. Suddenly everyone turned to her. "I know it sounds crazy, but this dog understands. He reacts to specific information." Larson looked skeptical, but Eleanor nodded. "Military dogs are trained to comprehend complex situations. Commander isn't just smart, he's exceptional." David used to say he was the most human dog he'd ever known. Susan pulled a photo from Ella Lehner's album, David in uniform with Commander, both looking proud. Their connection was extraordinary. David could communicate with Commander in ways that amazed everyone. The detective sighed. "I appreciate the dog's training, but we need concrete evidence." That's when Sarah had an idea. "What if we could get Commander to show us where he was kept before Miller bought him?" "Dogs can't testify," Larson began. "Not testify," Sarah interrupted, "but lead. Police use dogs to locate missing persons all the time. Why not use Commander to find where he was kept?" Eleanor straightened in her chair. "It's worth trying." Commander responds to tracking commands if he recognizes an area. 2 days later they implemented the plan based on Miller's information. They focused on areas near Reed's auto shop. Commander rode in the K9 unit vehicle, alert and focused in a way no one had seen since his rescue near an abandoned property 10 miles from where David's car was discovered. Commander's behavior changed dramatically. He began pulling hard on his leash, leading officers down an overgrown drive to a dilapidated cabin. When they reached the structure, Commander circled it urgently, then sat before a padlocked cellar door, barking insistently as officers secured a warrant and forced entry. Sarah stood back with Elelainer both holding their breath. The search team descended into darkness with Commander leading the way. 20 minutes later a shout echoed from below, "We've got something, evidence. Collection team needed." Commander emerged first, pressing against Eleanor's legs as the officers exited the cellar one by one, their expressions grim but excited. "No human remains," Larson reported, "but we found hair, blood, evidence and clear signs someone was held there. And this." He held up an evidence bag containing a military ID card and dog tags. Eleanor gasped. "David's," she confirmed for the first time since his rescue. Commander made a sound that was neither bark nor whine but something in between, a communication of profound emotion that needed no translation. The investigation had only just begun, but they all understood one thing with absolute certainty. Commander hadn't just been abandoned by a stranger. He had escaped and had been trying to find his way home ever since the news broke. 2 weeks later Lucas Reed was arrested in a neighboring state, charged with kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder. Evidence from the cabin cellar had been processed with priority status, revealing David's blood fibers from his clothing and fingerprints, confirming Reed's presence through Commander's continuing reactions and Reed's eventual confession. Detectives pieced together what happened. Reed had targeted David after a dispute at his auto shop, ambushing him on a remote road, forcing him into Reed's vehicle while Commander was left in David's abandoned car. But Reed underestimated the bond between handler and dog. Commander had tracked them to the cabin where Reed had been holding David for ransom, believing his military background meant family money. When Commander found the cabin, Reed panicked. In the ensuing chaos, David managed to unlock Commander's travel kennel. The dog attacked Reed, allowing David to escape. Though severely injured, Reed had chased after David but returned to find Commander gone, assuming both had fled. Together Reed abandoned the cabin later, selling Commander at the truck stop after finding him wandering, searching for David. What Reed didn't know, what they all now feared, was that David had fled injured into the wilderness surrounding the cabin. The area was vast, with steep ravines and dense forest. "We're organizing the largest search party this county has seen," Detective Larson told them. "If David made it out alive, we'll find evidence." Elelainer's face showed the struggle between hope and dread. After 14 months, what are the chances? Sarah looked at Commander, who had been unusually restless since the cabin discovery. "What if Commander leads the search? If anyone can find David?" The search began at dawn. Commander wore a specialized K9 vest with a GPS tracker. Handlers tried attaching a lead, but Commander resisted until they allowed Eleanor to hold it. "He knows what we're doing," she said quietly. "Let him work." Released at the cabin site, Commander immediately took a path no one had considered, away from the road, deeper into the forest, moving with certainty. Despite the time that had passed, the search team followed, documenting the route. 3 miles in, Commander led them to a small stream, then along its bank for Another half-mile he stopped abruptly at a rock formation, sniffing intensely, before squeezing through a narrow opening. His barking from inside was frantic, desperate. When searchers widened the opening enough to enter, they found a small cave inside were unmistakable signs of habitation, makeshift bedding, food wrappers, a crude calendar scratched into stone, and a note protected in a waterproof military case dated just 2 months earlier. If found, my name is David Williams, injured but surviving, moving locations regularly, unable to navigate out due to disorientation. If you find this, please contact Eleanor Williams. The note confirmed what seemed impossible. David had survived his initial escape, finding shelter and sustenance through survival training, but had he survived the harsh winter that followed? Commander provided the answer. Instead of remaining at the cave, he pressed onward, following a trail only he could detect, leading them further into the wilderness. Sarah stayed close to Eleanor, supporting her through the difficult terrain. He's alive, the older woman whispered. Commander knows. After another mile, they reached a crude lintel constructed against a rock face, partially hidden by foliage. Commander's barking changed to high-pitched whines. The search team approached cautiously, calling David's name from inside the shelter. A weak voice responded, "Commander, is that you, boy?" The hospital corridor was quiet, saved for the occasional squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. Sarah sat beside Eleanor, both women exhausted, but unable to leave. Through the ICU window they could see David, thin-bearded, connected to monitors and IVs, with Commander curled impossibly on the narrow bed beside him. Special permission granted due to extraordinary circumstances. The doctor says it's a miracle he survived, Susan whispered, returning with coffee. 14 months in the wilderness with a badly healed leg fracture and limited supplies. Eleanor nodded, eyes never leaving her son. David always said Commander was the best survival partner anyone could have. Now I understand. The medical team had been astonished by David's condition despite significant weight loss and the improperly healed fracture he showed. Remarkable adaptation to his circumstances. He had created a system of shelters, moving between them seasonally, using his military survival training to find food and water, but the psychological toll had been severe. Disoriented from his initial head injury and fearful Reed would find him, David had avoided seeking help, convinced he was still being hunted. Only in recent months had he begun leaving markers, hoping someone might find him. He thought Commander was dead, Eleanor said softly when Reed separated them. David heard gunshots. He assumed the worst. Sarah watched the German shepherd lying protectively alongside his handler, head resting on David's chest, and Commander spent a year chained to a tree, waiting for a chance to finish his mission. Military dogs don't abandon their handlers, Eleanor replied. Ever. Detective Wilson had explained how crucial Commander's evidence had been. The dog's reactions during questioning had helped break Reed, who finally admitted everything. The GPS tracking of Commander's search path had revealed critical timeline information about David's movements. A nurse entered David's room to check vitals. Commander raised his head, watchful but allowing her to work. The dog hadn't left David's side since the rescue, maintaining his vigilant protection despite his own ordeal. What happens now? Sarah asked. The question had been weighing on her. Her connection to this family had developed through extraordinary circumstances, but her role was seemingly complete. Eleanor reached for Sarah's hand. Now we heal all of. Sigh. Just. Sarah hesitated. I drove past that house for 3 years before I Stopped 3 years of seeing him chained. There, but you did stop, Eleanor said. Firmly, when it mattered most you acted. Without you, Commander would still be there. And David, she couldn't finish the sentence. A doctor approached with updates. David was stabilizing well. The leg would require surgery but was salvageable. His psychological recovery would take time, but having Commander returned to him was already showing remarkable effects. As the doctor spoke, David's eyes opened. He looked directly through the window at his mother, then at Sarah. His gaze was questioning. Eleanor stood, gesturing for Sarah to follow. It was time for proper introductions inside the room. Commander's tail thumped weakly against the bed as they entered it. David's voice was raspy from disuse. Mom said you saved Commander, he said to Sarah, that you wouldn't give up even when everyone said to mind your own business. Sarah moved closer, suddenly shy. He saved you, I just helped him get back. Mission. David's hand rested on Commander's head. That's not how Mom tells it. His eyes, so similar to his dog's in their intelligence and depth, studied her. Thank you seems inadequate. I only wish I'd stopped sooner. Sarah admitted. You stopped, David said simply. Most people never do. Commander shifted position, creating space between himself and David, a subtle invitation that surprised the nurses. Observing Sarah hesitantly reached out, touching Commander's coat, now beginning to regain its healthy shine. He approves of you, David said. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. He's an excellent judge of character. In that moment Sarah understood. Something fundamental had changed in her life. The simple act of refusing to look away, of challenging what others accepted, had set in motion events she could never have imagined. As Commander gently pressed his head against her hand, the circle of connection between them all seemed to complete itself. Handler, dog, mother, rescuer, bound together by choices that defined who they truly were. 6 months later, Sarah parked in front of Eleanor's house, smiling at the sight that greeted her. David sat on the front porch steps, his legs still in a brace, but now bearing weight beside him. Commander stood alert, his coat fully restored to glossy black and tan, his body strong and healthy once more. The transformation in both was remarkable. David's beard was trimmed, his face filled out, eyes clear and present. Commander's bearing had returned to that of a working military dog, confident, powerful, and intensely connected to his handler. As Sarah approached, Commander trotted to meet her, circling once before, pressing against her legs and greeting. David's smile was warm as he used a cane. To stand right on time, he said. We've been waiting. Today marked a special occasion. Commander's official certification as a service and therapy dog. While he had always been David's service dog, they had expanded their mission, training together to help others with PTSD and trauma recovery. How was the final evaluation? Sarah asked, reaching down to ruffle Commander's ears. The dog had completed an intensive re-certification program, remarkable considering his year of neglect and trauma. Perfect score, David said proudly. The evaluator said she'd never seen such intuitive responses. Commander can detect anxiety episodes before visible symptoms appear. Eleanor emerged from the house carrying a camera. We need to document this day, she insisted. The 3 people who saved each other. Sarah had heard the phrase before. David's description of their interconnected journeys. He maintained that while everyone credited Sarah with saving Commander and Commander with saving him, few recognized how the experience had transformed Sarah's life as well. She couldn't deny it. Since the rescue, Sarah had changed careers, leaving accounting to work with animal welfare organizations. She had helped draft new legislation strengthening anti-chaining, laws in their state testifying before committees about Commander's case, and then there was her growing relationship with David and his family, weekly dinners, long walks with Commander, and conversations that stretched into the night. The connection that had begun in crisis had deepened into something none of them had anticipated. The center called, David said as they settled on the porch. They've accepted our program. Proposal: 6 veterans and their service dog starting next month, full funding. Sarah's excitement matched his. They had developed the program together, combining David's military experience with Sarah's organizational skills. Commander will be the demonstration dog, David continued, watching his partner with evident pride. From chained and abandoned to teaching others how to heal. Full circle as they discussed details. Commander suddenly tensed, head turning toward the street. A car had pulled up, and the dog's posture changed, not threatening but alert in a specific way Sarah had learned to recognize. Trigger response, David explained quietly, his hand moving to Commander's back in a calming gesture. Certain engine sounds still bring back the trauma. Sarah watched as David guided Commander through the moment using techniques they now taught others. The dog responded immediately, relaxing under his handler's touch, eyes refocusing. That's the most amazing part, Sarah observed, not just that you both survived, but how you're transforming the experience into something that helps others. David's expression grew thoughtful. You know, when I was out there in the wilderness, I made a promise: if I survived, if I ever found Commander again, we wouldn't waste the second chance. Commander moved between them, settling with his body touching both David and Sarah, a bridge of warm fur and steady presence. He never stopped looking for you, Sarah said, even chained to that tree. He was always on mission, and you never stopped looking for his truth, David replied, his hand finding hers, even when everyone said it wasn't your concern. Iner captured the moment with her cameraman. Woman and dog connected in a triangle of trust and purpose. None of them were who they had been before. The chain that had once bound Commander to a tree had been transformed into links of a different kind, connections that had saved them all. As the sun began to set, Commander raised his head, alert but peaceful. His mission had evolved, but his purpose remained unchanged: to protect, to serve, to connect. The German shepherd who had once stood alone, forgotten and chained, now sat at the center of a new pack formed through courage, persistence, and the refusal to look away when others suffered. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who needs inspiration, and help us spread the message that one person who refuses to mind their own business can change everything. Sometimes the chains that need breaking are not just the physical ones we can